Hi everyone. I have two items to show you today, which we'll be making into two separate videos. Two items are going to be related, but different. Both of them are special items to me and in my collection. They are some of the most used Sepharim in my library. So the first one is probably familiar to some people. It's a famous title called Machzor Vitry. Machzor Vitry is a very old sefer in terms of the age of the text, and it dates to the 11th century, probably to the end of the 11th century, when the beginning of it was put into text and beginning to be copied. And over the next century, the 12th century, it formed and structured itself, although there are different versions of it, and we'll get into that. And it in the beginning of the 13th century is when the latest and most final texts of the Machzor Vitry, as I am referring to it, were written down. Now, I chose this actual volume because it's turning 100. For Hanukkah in 1922 in Nuremberg, the second edition of the Machzor Vitry, much more expanded and annotated, was put out by Shimon Halevi Horowitz, who I believe was later to become a rabbi in Leipzig, and he expanded on the earlier edition, which was done in the early 1890s by Adolf Berliner, by really taking what we know of as the main Machzor Vitry manuscript, which then was in the British Museum, today in the British Library, which is referring to the same one. It has the same shelf number, 27200, 27201 for the two volumes. And what that is actually one of the more late copies, written copies of the Machzor Vitry that has the most in terms of words and additions into the manuscript. And this is almost word for word of that manuscript with a few other manuscripts mixed in. The minute details of this are very academic, and I've seen some nice things written about it. I'm not going to get into that now, but let it suffice to say that later editions of the Machzor Vitry, which reflect only Rashi's works, look more like the Sefer HaPardes, which was a work actually dictated by Rashi to a secretary. While this work contains that material, and it contains other material that was put into it later. Now, that's all I want to say about that. The actual text of the Machzor Vitry is not like what we think of as a Machzor today. When we think of a Machzor today, we think of a holiday prayer book. Those texts from the holidays are in this, but so is other texts of the halacha, such as Challah is in this, such as the Haggadah is in this, how to clean your home for Pesach, to get the chametz out, and to also make your dishes kosher for Pesach. The laws of Tisha B'Av are in here, and that includes the laws of mourning. Now, the Machzor Vitry has become known in later times as a work of minhag, which is custom, but it is far more than that. It's actually halacha, and the minhag that is appended to it is what people look at it and find interesting, because halacha has moved on from medieval texts into modern codes, what we call it, or the Shulchan Aruch. That's what they're referring to. Now, I will just give you one example of the huge assortment of material that's in this text, and some of these are old Aramaic texts from the Amatorgamon that maybe come from Babylon or something of that age, and they've only survived, to my knowledge, in the Machzor Vitry, and they're texts of a Matorgamon who used to speak in an oratory on Shavuot or Shavuos, and explain the way, maybe think of a lengthy Targum Yonason. He would explain in a long way, morphing midrashim and pesukim on the happenings of Mount Sinai, and these are very old texts, and I have no doubt that they circulated very widely, let's say in the 9th century or the 8th century. But today, to my knowledge, these only survive in the Machzor Vitry, and that's just one example. I'll give you another example of something I was looking at this evening. We all know of this, what we call it a song, but back then it was a piyut called Kol Mekadesh Shavi, that's said on Friday night, authored by Moshe ben Kalonimus. The first text that carries this piyut that we know of, or let me say earliest, is the Machzor Vitry, and is this very manuscript. And not only that, but there are variations that make, at least to me, make more sense in keeping in deference with the words of Pesukim, and also contain an additional stanza at the end, which sums up the whole song and makes it make more sense to those who analyze piyutim. The same thing is true with Dunash ben Labrat, who composed Deror Yikro, which is sung on Shabbos day. There are 2 stanzas that add to that are only available, to my knowledge, in the Machzor Vitry, and it would be lost to the world if not for that. Additionally, I'll say something special about this edition. The amount of work done here is a huge amount, and what I enjoy the most is the references to all over the rabbinic literature that comprises of the Machzor Vitry, and the insight you get into the learning and the style of learning and understanding that they had in the Middle Ages. There is a remarkable text in the Machzor Vitry, is also the Pirkei Avot or Pirkei Avos. At this time, and we know this from other sources as well, people would recite this on various weeks after the prayer of Mincha, and the variants in the Mishnah text alone are enough for a huge amount of scholarship, and something that people should really pay attention to, because the Machzor Vitry is concurrent with other of the earliest Mishnah manuscripts, and what I'm referring to is called Girsaot or Girsa, which is the actual text. What did the Mishnah say? And there are serious changes in here that actually should merit serious learning, I think, from this very text. The commentary we know of the Machzor Vitry has been attributed to Rashi, but we know it isn't Rashi. Some later scholars have thought it was Yaakov ben Shimshon, who lived a little bit after him, probably during the times of Rabbenu Tam, and it is also a remarkable commentary to the Pirkei Avot, Pirkei Avos, and it's different understandings of different words of the rabbis of Chazal are remarkably different than how the generations after this have understood them. This is a really remarkable text inside this remarkable work of Machzor Vitry. Another of the many, many things that Machzor Vitry is famous among scholars for is its direction on how to write safrut. Safrut or safrus is the ritual script that one writes a Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzot, and the text of the Machzor Vitry and the instruction is something that was lost after the Black Death, and a little bit after, as Ashkenaz, as it was formerly known in the medieval times, became less so, and really the Renaissance times sort of changed the way Jews lived, and Jews followed halacha in many ways. And the section on writing a Sefer Torah is almost unique in the amount of detail it tells us. The entire text of Masechet Sofrim, which is a text almost as old as the Mishnah, is completely recounted here, word for word. And after that, there is the text of Rabbenu Tam telling us how to write a Sefer Torah, and then there's other text that is additional instruction for the exact minutia of where to put a break, where to put a large or small letter, where to put dots, and how to construct letters with what they call white letters inside them. Those who are Sofrim may know what that is, and so on. It is worth some serious learning, and that's all I have to say about the matter, because the amount of detail is so large. The final part of this manuscript, Machzor Vitry, that has been made into an edition, is what's called Kuntras HaPiyutim, which is an additional transcription of other manuscripts aside from the British Library manuscript into this edition, which has these integral texts of piyutim that come from different parts of the year, and he has an introduction telling you where each one goes and whether we know the author of it. Many of them we do know the author. A lot of them remarkably come from Spain, and they're from the Spanish, the Spanish pietistic tradition, and remarkably made their way to northern France and to the Germany area to this period of time. And the ones that have been recounted, for example, in the books of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi that have come down to us, there are variants, and that's what makes this one of the things that make the study of these things so remarkable, is the amount of information we have on the different ways things have come down to us from those times, which has been almost 1,000 years. Just almost, very, very wild to think about. But it has been almost 1,000 years, and yet we have all of this information on the daily life of Jews in that time. I think about Rashi in terms of all of that he wrote, is that he can be seen through many different lenses of the different things that he wrote. But when you look at a text like the Machzor Vitry, you think of Rashi almost seeing him in his own home. You can almost see how he made Kiddush on Shabbos. You could almost see how he instructed people how to build an Eruv. You can see how, including an Eruv Tavshilin, there's text on that in this volume, and all kinds of other fascinating items that have come down to us virtually 1,000 years later. So I hope you enjoyed my introduction to the Machzor Vitry. I invite you to look further and to study this integral sefer. My copy of the Machzor Vitry is already weathered, and it hasn't been owned by me for terribly long, but it's been beautifully been rebound by Mr. Schnerb, Olav Shalom. If those of you who may have known him from Washington Heights, and it was already annotated by another owner who wrote some things in the margin, including one on the Zohar. And to me, this is almost like books that are centuries older because of these large margins almost inviting you and asking you to put your own notes in there, and which can eventually make for another edition if you write enough. So this is, I know that this edition has been made into facsimile and it's been made into 2 volumes, and if you've seen it, more likely than not, if you've seen this edition, you've seen it in facsimile. But I went out of my way to get this old edition of it because I like this large format and the single large volume edition of this book.